Alright, I've had a lot of questions about how do you actually work with the AS and AD curves, especially when it relates to historical events like the Great Depression or the 70s stagflation. So I thought we'd tackle the two main causes of recession, a decline in aggregate demand or a decline in short-run aggregate supply. That'll be a separate screencast. And as you know, the price level and real GDP are determined by where the short-run aggregate supply and the aggregate demand curve meet. So this is your short-run macroeconomic equilibrium. This equilibrium here at a price level of 100 and a real GDP of about 15 may or may not be at the potential output of the U.S. So this may or may not be at our sort of long-run aggregate supply curve, also known as the quantity at which we have potential GDP. For simplicity's sake, we'll assume that's where we're starting from. So the economy is at its potential. It's in both short-run and long-run macroeconomic equilibrium. Everything's going along fairly nicely. And then a stock market crash. So we've got to decide with this historical event, the stock market crash of 1929, is this something that's going to shift the aggregate supply curve or shift the aggregate demand curve? And if you look at your list of things that will shift the aggregate demand curve, sure enough, wealth or asset value is in there. So we're looking at a shift in the aggregate demand curve. Will this be an increase or a decrease? Well, we saw wealth decline with a stock market crash, so we assume people will spend less. And it's true that at every price level, any price level you pick at all, you'll have people spending less than before, right? So instead of 7, people are going to spend something like 4. And that's true at every price level. So you're going to see sort of a leftward shift here in aggregate demand. And what happens to equilibrium when the aggregate demand shifts to the left? Well, let's make sure to label this here. So if this is the first and second aggregate demand curve, so we have a leftward shift, we notice that the economy's price level will be different than before. If you find the intersection of the new aggregate demand curve and the same old supply curve, remember, nothing has happened to shift the aggregate supply curve, you're going to expect that price level, while it was 100 before, will be something less than that now. So price level will have dropped. Likewise, your GDP level will have dropped as well. So we expect prices to drop and GDP to drop. And what's not shown here, but we know to be true, is that unemployment will rise, right? As GDP is dropping, there definitely won't be more jobs, and most certainly will be less jobs. And if we look at the data from 1929 to 1933, sure enough, price level is dropping. We have deflation, in fact. GDP drops by about 1/3. Unemployment rises to 25%. So this model predicts exactly what happened in the Great Depression. It does not predict what the solution is. That will come later. But the idea is that using the aggregate supply and aggregate demand model, you can predict and interpret many of the major economic events of the 20th century. And while the economy may self-correct in the long run or may utilize fiscal policy to push it back towards its long-run equilibrium here, it's true that in the short run there will be what's called a recessionary gap, where the economy comes to rest at a quantity below its potential. That difference right there is your recessionary gap. If your GDP is below its potential level, as it is here, it's a recessionary gap. If your GDP is above your potential level temporarily, it is called an inflationary gap. And there you have it.